Thank you all for joining today. We do have a few things on the schedule. I have a mea culpa, which Tom pointed out, which is that I credited him with the timeline rather than Mark. Sorry about that, Mark. I think that one of the things that is most important for us to at least begin to get to the other side of is what we're going to put on the website, since that really is going to be our public face. Patricia had given us some suggestions, and I don't know if anyone had comments or thoughts or other ideas.
Larry, my only idea, if there are no other hands up, was I was looking at the announcements section that she had talked about, and whether or not that was going to be, a special section, whether we would list prior announcements, current announcements, and future events, or whether that all, we just need a good spot for that on the website. So she did list it, and that was part of her content analysis piece, but that has to be very prominent in terms of old information, current and/or prospective new information.
Patricia, you did join us.
I'm sorry, it takes me a bit to transition between work and this meeting, so I definitely apologize.
It's quite all right. I wasn't sure if you were going to be able to make it or not.
I'm here.
Good. My only two thoughts with regard to the layout that you provided, Patricia, were changing meetings to hearings. And I thought that we should have a page for the MMD subcommittee.
So with changing meetings to hearings, where do you want the recordings of these meetings to be held? Is that what Warren was just addressing that I missed?
The way that you had it laid out, you had the information with regarding the recordings of our meetings in a different location than under meetings. Under meetings, you had the information with regard to the public hearings.
Okay, my bad. Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it in the last 48 hours.
What have you been doing?
Just a few things.
And those were my only two comments. Other than we do need to we need to A, get it live, and we need to B, work on content. And everyone should be working on a brief bio for the website.
So I'm sorry, Larry, because I missed your 2 points because I only got one. You wanted to change meetings to hearings, and what was the other point that I missed?
We should have at least a page for the MMD subcommittee.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
All right.
But can we talk about that just 1 second?
We certainly can.
What would be the MMD subcommittee is going to have hearings as well and everything else, and they'll have recordings as well of their meetings, one would assume. What is the distinction then? What would be on this MMD subcommittee page? Because I saw them being listed on, where we have bios and then just them listed separately. But what do you think would go on this separate page for the MMD subcommittee?
Whatever they want.
Okay.
I think it should be, I think that their website should be a part of our website is what I'm saying.
Got it. Okay.
And so the MMD line is really what takes you into that.
Got it. Okay.
Patricia, I had a quick question about the bios. How do you have like an idea of or a template that you would like everybody to keep the same?
Yes.
Is there something that you would send to each one of us so we can?
Yes. And I endeavor to do that this evening. I meant to do it last night, but time got away. And I'm trying to figure out what works best for you guys. So I'm going to make a Word document and basically have it with a table inside, so your name will be there, and then there'll be a column that you'll fill out for your bio, and then another column will be where you upload your picture.
Okay.
Does
I just
that work for people? I'm assuming.
I think that's, I mean, sounds good. I just also want to let you guys know I'm having some issues with Zoom. I don't know. I can't turn my camera on because it keeps booting me out of Zoom. So that's why I have my camera off. So if I do disappear, it's not because I quit on you guys. It's I don't know what's going on.
We all understand Zoom issues. We all live them.
Just one idea about the website. I would think just like Larry said, we'd have the redistricting, the main website, and then when you click on it for this subcommittee, it kind of looks identical to ours, so people aren't going to another page and saying, "Oh, wait a minute, it looks totally different." If they want to go recordings should be in the same place. Meeting times, same place. You know, so it's just when they get used to
Mirror.
our website, when they go to the subcommittee, it looks they're getting the same information. It just they don't have to rethink the whole thing.
Well, we can let the MMD subcommittee provide more input on what they want, but certainly, yeah, that can happen. I can make sure that happen. My big thing on the website is, I think I asked, is Patrick on? Because I asked him to provide me a name of who I could work with on this, and I really want to get going. So I don't think that I have that yet, and really want to start progressing it with that person.
Trisha, Pat is not able to be on. He had a conflict, but I'll flag this for him.
Thanks, Caitlin. Appreciate it.
The other thing while we're on Pat, that you could flag for him, please, Caitlin, would be the interns, where he is on that.
Yes, I will make note of that for you.
Thank you.
And I meant to, and I do apologize to you guys. It was a very crazy week for me. I have been keeping up the actions, decisions, stuff, and I do intend to actually try and say what I see as open items. I did that before last week's meeting. I did not do it before this week's meeting. So I will do that. And you know, I did it last time, I think on Sunday. I'm going to try and do it before the work weekends so that people can see stuff if there's stuff that needs to get done during the business week. So I endeavor to do that, but I certainly want to see about the interns because that'll help me with some of this work.
Absolutely. The next thing on my agenda was Mark's timeline. And I didn't know if in the last week anyone had any further thoughts on the timeline.
I have made the switches from public meeting to public hearings, and council, the correct spelling on council was given by Tom. So those corrections have been put in. It's just, again, now dates, you know, it was a draft. You guys kind of pick dates when you'd like to have the meetings or hearings.
That's a topic where I think we're going to need to come back to. I'm not sure that we're really capable of answering the questions yet. I think in part
I just
Pardon
have
me?
a question. Once your timeline is finalized, will that be shared with us?
it will be a public document, so yes.
Okay.
We can send you the draft too, so you just have an idea of what we're looking at. And by all means, if you have a better idea about the timeline, that's, you know, bring it out. Because, you know, I was rereading this and it, you know, the and just on the front page on the law, it goes, it is intent that the legislature is intent of the legislator that the commission and the MMD redistricting subcommittee shall work collaboratively and in tandem and working really close together. So I don't want us to split off into two groups, one working this track and one working this track. I want us to be working right together. So we come up with the best product towards the end. And we're not, you know, we get to 4 months out and they're like, oh, this is the direction we went and this is the direction they went. You know, we're totally separate, but we're working collaboratively. So we come up with the best product for the entire county.
Agreed. So with regard to the timeline, since the charge of the MMD is to submit a recommendation to the commission to be incorporated in, I guess, ways deemed appropriate by the commission, is there like a target time frame for the MMD to have its work done?
I don't think that there is a specific deadline for that. It is our goal to have the entire project completed and submitted to the county legislature by summer. June is our hope for date. Yeah, Tom.
If we follow Patrick's suggestion of trying to work out timelines by working backwards from things that we can't control, if we say that we want to be done with all of our work at the end of June, we probably would need to know what the MMD districts are by somewhere around the end of March or early April at the latest. Marie, I'm sorry, I can't be more specific than that. But
Oh, that
figuring,
probably sounds reasonable because I was thinking March, April.
Yeah, because we will need to have included at least your first draft of where that all stands in our first draft, and have that available for public comment.
Okay.
And you may very well want to have a public hearing on your draft even before that.
You have a hand, Larry.
Yes, Patricia.
Yeah, to Mark's point about the collaboration, I am still following up on having a repository that we all can put our documents in and access rather than individual documents that are trying to be shared and in our emails and so forth. I didn't know if we want to, I mean, I think the MMD, we should be transparent with the MMD and allow them to see that repository. That's my suggestion. But I didn't know if the MMD wanted a separate repository that we would not have access to unless they granted it to us.
And we probably don't need an answer to that today.
Yeah, I guess if we could get back to you because we had not really discussed that.
Okay, no problem.
but that does make a lot of sense. That's a good idea, Patricia.
I mean, if the whole process is supposed to be public and transparent, so I mean, I don't see why everything wouldn't be widely available.
But I'm talking about working documents.
Yeah. So yeah, if we can get back to y'all.
Okay.
I have a couple of more questions. I don't know if this is the time to ask them. So in the legislation, it talks about 3 initial members of the MMD being appointed, and then the MMD being responsible for appointing the other 4. But it also talks about the MMD getting recommendations from the chair. So Patrick provided us with a list of candidates, but I don't know if that constitutes what would be deemed recommendations from the chair.
I didn't specifically recall that phraseology. So I'd have to go back to the legislation personally.
Okay. My other question is, Patrick also provided us with a RFP, which I did read through. And it's probably a situation where when we get together to discuss it, we'll probably be able to just tweak it to conform it to the intent of the MMD. Is there a certain amount of time that a RFP has to be out?
Patrick had indicated to us that it needed to be out for 20 days.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Tom.
I want to go back to Marie's point just now. She talked about the recommendations for filling out the rest of the MMD subcommittee. The work of the MMD subcommittee is really critical to us being able to complete this project on time. And I think it may make sense, just for the sake of keeping things rolling, that we say that all of the remaining people who volunteered to serve so far have been transmitted on. Patrick has taken care of that, right? Marie, you have received all of those resumes.
Yes.
But I would be in favor of us saying that we're not going to be sifting through those and making separate recommendations from the commission to the subcommittee. I would say that you should treat all of those potential members as live, active members, and make your appointments as soon as you possibly can, because I think we really do need to get rolling on this, but I don't know how the rest of the members of the commission feel about that idea.
Anybody have other thoughts? That's
This
fine
is
with me.
Joan.
Yes, Joan.
Marie, the commission interviewed for the 5 to go on the commission. I'm not sure what the MD will choose to do, but there could possibly be interview to choose the 4 from the list that you have. I don't know how many is on the list.
Yeah, I think he gave us like 13 candidates when you take out the people that were already appointed. There's like 13.
Just to help you out a little bit with the 13, that'd be a lot of interviews that you would have to do. What we did is we went around and we looked at all of those resumes and decided on our top 6, or I think we picked 8, hoping to get 5, and then 2 dropped out. So you could pare it down. You could do all 13, but that'd be a lot of work. Or you could pare it down to what the 3 think would be maybe the best candidates, and then interview them. You know, it might just help your workload a little bit.
Agreed.
Yeah. Patricia.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going through the legislation again, because I didn't remember that we as the commission had any say in that. So Marie, where were you? Can you point out? Because I was reading it differently. And again, it just could be that I'm in the wrong section and there's different
Section
parts.
D3 has some information on that. D3.
Yeah,
which is
that's what I
A.
was reading. Yeah.
So
So go ahead.
yeah, probably 3, because 3 says that, and Marie said it a little earlier about the recommendations. That appears to be referring to the initial recommendations that were provided to our commission.
The
I
3.
agree. I agree.
Oh,
That's what I was
okay.
thinking.
Only the 3.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, warrant.
Yeah,
That's
because it
exactly
does
it.
say subsequently, those members of the MMD, after examining the recommendations of the chair of the LBC, shall select the remaining members of the MMD subcommittee by a majority vote. And then from there, you select your own leadership on a chairperson.
That was my recollection of it as well.
Okay, I just was double checking because I didn't think we had a hand in it.
Yeah, appreciate that, Patricia.
Okay,
No, and I
thank you
think
for the
Marie-
clarification.
Yep, and I think your question about the the recommendations have been answered, because that was what we got earlier. So I don't think you're looking for new recommendations.
This would be LBC recommendation.
And to clarify that, so that means that the 3 that have been approved, appointed for MMD choose the 4, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Now it does say by majority vote. So I don't know if that impacts that question about interviewing people. I mean, I guess you can still have an interview and a subsequent majority vote, but I guess that's still open.
So it's up to the 3 of you, Marie.
Okay.
All right. Moving along. I guess the next item was that Warren had provided a draft of an evaluation tool. And I don't know if anybody had an opportunity to review that and had comments.
I did not get a chance to see it. We haven't been doing screen sharing. Would that be something that if we want to go through it now, we could share the document and just look through it? I know I did not get to see it. Did it come out today or it came out last night and I missed it?
I think it was Saturday night, I believe.
Sorry, Warren.
Oh, it's it might be more fruitful to have people go back and, take the time to look at it than try and get screen share, but since we only have an hour anyway, so, because there are a couple documents there, like 3 or 4 different templates of a draft and different things. So I think we got time this week to review it, maybe talk about it next week.
Yeah, we got 3 weeks before you're gonna have to actually use it. So, dig deep into it and instead of trying to cram it into an hour.
Warren, I have a question. You actually sent 2 versions of it, one of which was 7 pages and one was 6. And it looked to me like the 6-page version was the final one. The 7-page version had some parts when I tried to print it that came out just solid black. Whereas the 6-page version, actually, I could read it was gray and some writing in it. So I thought it was the 6-page version that was the one that was the final, but I just want to clarify and make sure I'm right about that.
What I recall was I saved the copy in Word, I saved the copy in Macintosh Pages, and as a PDF, not knowing what people could read. So I think they're all the same version, just saved in a different format.
Okay, like I say, when I tried to print it, the one came out with large blocks of black section, but as long as both of them are the same, that makes it easy. I know the 6-page version was the one I had an easier time being able to view.
So do you recall which one had the problem? Was it?
No, I don't, unfortunately.
Are you a Mac guy or a PC person or?
PC.
Okay.
Julia, did you have a comment or a question? No. Okay. You're muted if you are.
No, she was just giving a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
missed the distinction
sorry,
between
I was just acknowledging that I got them and they were all readable to me and I appreciated it.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Okay, so we'll all dig in on those this week as well. And then the last thing on my list of where we were and what we were to spend time on was the my beginnings of an RFP for mapping services. And Warren had some comments, particularly with regard to my evaluation criteria. And I understood those, Warren, and thank you. I think you're right. I think that there does need to be more descriptive material in the evaluation area. And I didn't know if others had any particular comments. The one kind of overarching comment that I had, which I hadn't thought about until I sat down and started writing this, was mapping software. And the assumption that I used was that whoever we hire to do the mapping is going to come with his, her, or its own software, rather than our going out and seeking a software vendor and then looking for a consultant to work with that software. And I don't know if that comports with other people's thoughts, or we could also have some issues with doing that. There could be some copyright issues and that sort of thing that become problematic. But my thought was to simply leave it to the consultant to work through all of those issues. Yes, Patricia.
Just from my knowledge of mapping tools, off of what we've been doing at the state level, there are several free tools that give a lot of good in-depth. And I think that there's a piece to me that says we want them to use that because then the output can be viewed and used by the public as well. If they use a proprietary tool, which is okay, if that's what they're really comfortable, they need to have output files that really can be used by the general public to get into the details of the underlying data. So I think that we want, whatever happens, we want to be able to ensure that the public can work with the maps that are created.
Unquestionably. Mark, you had a comment?
Yeah, I didn't get to read your RFP, draft RFP, but you did include the services that are at the end of H1 in the law, because that company needs to provide those last 3 sentences. You know, they're supposed to, drawing expert resources, modeling districts, data-driven, and they're supposed to give us the data-driven analysis that assists us in making our decisions. So that's why I'm thinking we got to, you know, have one company that is, make sure they're going to give us all that, just not dump us a bunch of maps and numbers.
I would agree. We're going to need that kind of information from them.
And also, I'd like to talk about like the first 2 sentences in H1. If anyone can read it, what does that say to you? I wanted to go in a certain direction last week, but it looks like we wanted to go in another direction. And I'd just like to see what that means, what people think about H1, the first 2 sentences.
If anybody would like to share their screen, if you have it pulled up online, I've enabled screen sharing. Just wanted to let you know.
It's Caitlin.
Well, I don't have it electronically, I don't think. But it goes like this. It goes, the commission and the MMD subcommittee shall expeditiously issue 2 requests for proposals for map drawing services, one for the majority district and the other for the entirety of the Albany County. Now, that doesn't mean we have to have 2 separate mapping companies. Again, I wanted to go with one mapping company. So we're saying we're working with apples and apples instead of apple and oranges. Now you can have an RFP for the MMD just to zoom in on the majority minority districts, making sure they're all taken care of. And then that same company just works on the rest of the county. I just didn't want it that we see 2 there. And then for another reason, us as a commission, once we get all these proposals back, I want the best mapping company possible that's going to give us everything we need. Now, if we pick the best company, does that mean the MMD doesn't get the best company? They get whatever's left over. So I just think we got to think about that a little bit rather than just saying, oh yeah, let's have one company for MMD and one company for us. Let's go with apples for apples and ask that company to zoom in on the MMDs, making sure they're getting all their needs and whatever, you know, whatever lines are drawn, and then broaden that view out to get the rest of the county for us, the commission. That's just one thought. And then another thing I was thinking, do we know what the MMDs are? We know what they are now, but has the census changed those numbers? So if we don't get one company working on that, we could come up with, it could really get crazy towards the end because one company's thinking about one thing and another company's thinking something else.
I think that's part of the collaboration, Mark.
That's
Joan, did you
why
have
I
a
want to
comment?
work closely.
I
I
do
mentioned
have a
earlier.
comment when he finishes. He's
That's
not
what I
finished.
mentioned earlier, why we have to be working closely together, going down the same track so we don't get, you know, in diverging directions.
Joan?
Yes, I read it differently, Mark. I read it as there should be 2 different mappings. One for the MMD districts, and right now I think there are 6, maybe 7. And then the other one for the commission will take care of the other districts. So there is
I
you know,
understand
let
that.
me finish. And I think it behooves us to have two different ones so that they are focused on, they're working on the same numbers and they're going to come up with those districts as they see fit for the MMD. And then the commission will do the districts that are not the MMDs. And if something is, and then we come together to agree what will be presented to the legislature. But I think it really needs to be two separate firms. If they come up with the same thing, fine, but if they do not, that's where I think the suits came in because they didn't agree.
I think there might be a distinction to make between having a consistent software and consistent methodology and different consultants. If we have the common consultant for both groups, that consultant might be placed in a conflict situation from time to time. But we do need to have, I agree with Mark, we need to have apples to apples in terms of the methodology and the software system that's being used.
And
I think
Joan,
one other
but I
one other
understand. Just a second. I understand what Joan is saying, but we could have two separate RFPs, one with the focus driven on MMDs and another RFP on the rest of the county. Now, who wins those RFPs? It could be the same company if it's the best mapping company out there. But if we go and we grab one company and then it's like, well, you can't use this company because we're using it, then they're just, you see, now you're putting in a roadblock where you don't really need to throw up a roadblock.
I would agree with that methodology, Mark, that there need to be two separate RFPs. The conclusion of who should be selected in one case will be made by the commission, in the other case will be made by the MMD subcommittee. And it may or may not be the same consultant. That would be but I think that your points generally with regard to a commonality of software is significant.
But that's a good point. Let the MMD decide who they want. That's right. It's like if the proposal comes in and it helps them and it's the same one, well, that's fine. I got you. That works.
So you don't have a problem if they're different, as long as they use the same methodology. Is that correct? Great.
Well, we'll see. So a lot of these companies, I'm sure you may have to put that into the proposal, what their methodology will be, what their idea, how they're working the numbers, because you won't know. But I think two RFPs, one focused on just those districts and one on the rest of the county, and then see how it shakes out. And then if we're working collaboratively together, like we're supposed to, then we should be helping each other figuring out which is the best company for our outcome.
Yeah, Patricia.
I think when you guys are saying methodology, I think it's really something that is not easily defined. There are so many different criteria in which you can draw the maps, and there is no one right answer ever. So you can't define a methodology per se. Otherwise, you would be having a bias in how we're saying they should be drawn. So to have a common methodology is really not where I think we should be. I do agree we need to have a common software or something that's transferable, because you can put out the files from either and take it into the other is what is key. But you can't say, really, in my mind, you can't say methodology. The MMD, their methodology for that company may be to promote more MMD districts and how they cut the numbers and the lines. And I believe there's only 5 MMDs currently. There might be 6 LBC members, but there's only, I think, 5 MMDs, if I remember correctly. But I don't think you can use the word methodology, same methodology.
Okay, that's semantics. You got that world more than we do. We just want to make sure that we're working apples to apples,
Yep.
and not apples to oranges. And then when you say there's 5 MMDs
Currently.
1, 2,
currently,
3, 4, 6, 7.
I understand that. Now, what happens if that census has changed those?
Correct. And
That's
that's where, Mark, I get exactly where you're going. So I wrote down that as an open item, we have to discuss the definition of what are MMD districts.
Yes.
But if I think this through, it almost appears to me that the best way to do this is that we don't have just the MMD subcommittee define the MMDs. We go about and do it ourselves, and then we compare. Okay, because that's where the differences are going to come in. When we start mapping, we can't just take out portions. Everything has to fit together like a puzzle piece. So we're going to have to map everything.
Right.
And how other districts are mapped will determine what are MMD districts.
Correct. So I believe that we will need to map the entire county, while the MMD subcommittee focuses on what they think are MMD districts. And they may need some input from us at some point to see, but it's then that we have the discussion of where those lines are drawn for the MMD, the MMD districts. They do it independently, and then we do it independently, and then we collaborate on where that is.
I appreciate Patricia's point about methodology, and I'm just learning this trade as we go along. But would it be helpful in terms of our timeline and planning for us to discuss methodology before we get into the mapping? That is, not discuss methodology per se, but the criteria. What's important? Contiguous districts, majority districts, districts with preponderance of one party of preference, et cetera. I mean, there's probably 50 million ways to slice the pie, and we may need to talk about that before we get seriously into the work.
So
that's
One of
discussed
the
in
things
the
that we
law.
will need to have input from both council and from our mapping consultant as we go through that analysis ourselves. Patricia?
yeah, I was going to say, I can share something that the coalition that I'm working with at the state level has done as an educational piece that we recorded that goes through some of what that criteria is and how it's sort of, loosey-goosey and how you draw beyond the first major pieces. It gets very much open as to which rule you want to put forward above another rule. I don't know if that would be helpful or not.
But
Yeah, that would be
Leaf,
very helpful.
I just want to mention that those things that you're talking about are already written into the law.
Okay, good.
It's I, and you go into I2, and it's like subparagraph A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and they're already there. It's like you can't take into party. You can't take each one the certain size. No one can be larger than the other, and so those rules are already pretty much written.
Some of those rules are
Some
written.
of the,
Not all. They can't account for everything.
My thought, Patricia, yes, I think we should see that. And I think we should also see the current public free mapping that's available, so we can take a look at that as well. I am of the mindset that it should start with the MMD districts and work its way out toward the county rather than the opposite way. But that's a discussion for another time.
And I could give you really quick the fact that, so for instance, Princeton University did something called Representable, a free tool that allows communities and interested people to map out communities of interest. And that is one of the key factors one factor in deciding things. And then you have Dave's Redistricting and Redistricting R that are both free tools that are readily available. And I know the coalition I'm working with, Dave's redistricting is being used heavily. And we're swapping files now between some of us in the coalition and looking at maps through that.
I asked Patrick to send the transcript of the suit that created this law. And
Oh,
it's
great.
very interesting read. So you may want to ask Patrick to send a transcript, because I think when you read why this law was put into place, it gives it a different perspective.
I think that's a great, thank you for doing that, because I think
I've-
that's actually pretty important.
I've made note of that. Does everybody want to see a copy of it?
Please.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Tom has his hand up.
Yep, Tom?
It's getting dark. It's harder to see in here. Before we get away from the subject, though, I think one thing that I wanted to be clear about was, it seems to me the discussion amongst the members is there would be 2 separate RFPs for mapping services. And I think the law actually kind of says that pretty clearly, but we are not opposed to having the same company selected by each of the 2 groups, by the commission and by the subcommittee. It could be the same company. That's not prohibited. If we pick that company, it is not prohibited that the MMD subcommittee can't pick them. I think actually it would be a very good idea if it was the same company, but I think the point to clarify is there's no reason why it could not be the same company, and that we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we decided.
Patricia?
Yeah, I agree, but I would want our legal to weigh in on that.
Absolutely.
I think before we say that as absolute fact, I think we need to have our legal counsel really confirm that.
I would
Yeah,
agree.
along those lines, Patricia, and everyone else, I mean, it's the specs on the second RP that would determine that. For instance, we could write language that's favorable to the new firm sort of being in sync with the old firm, you know what I mean? And that's where legal would have to weigh in first, whether or not it's kosher to do that. But clearly, if they're selected, it would be because of the criteria that was written into the RFP, which means, you know, that obviously comes first. We could almost determine who's going to get, whether that same firm could get picked just by the way we write the language.
The way the subcommittee writes the language.
Yeah,
Mark.
The way that MMD, right, not us.
Yes, Mark.
Just real quick, something that Joan mentioned, I think maybe makes it, I believe it was Joan, but, and I don't know how long it takes once you do an RFP for a mapping company, how long it takes for that data to come back. But, and this may be a discussion for next week when we have a little bit more time, but it may make sense to have that first RFP go out and identify what the MMDs are in the area, because the census may have changed those a little bit. And then if it doesn't take 2 months and it doesn't push our timeline out, it may be a good idea to get an idea of how many they are and where they are, so they can start their work. And then once we see that, then we can move on to the greater county. But it all just depends on how long it takes. I don't know how long these companies take to come back once we give them the raw data. So it may be, you know, think about it over the week, that we can have that discussion next week to see if it's even, or do we go at the same time? I don't know. It's just, I think there's room there to flesh that out a little bit.
Well, at this point, the MMD is running slightly behind us anyways. So I think that we do have some time there. Not a lot, but some. Anything else on this aspect?
Yes, really quick.
Yes,
Mark
Warren.
had referred us to the place in the bill, but the criteria listed in the bill said included but not limited to.
Oh, by all means. Yeah.
So we of course have to come to I guess a concerted position on whether or not we think other items should be added, or are we content with those that were put in the law. I mean, my suggestion is maybe sticking with the law versus us creating our own criteria that other people might have a problem with. If that makes sense.
Well, I don't think communities of interest is in there. Is it?
You know what? I don't think it is.
And
So
that's
that would be-
where,
Yeah,
yeah,
well, that will be one we would have. I mean, but if we're gonna sit around and try to make up 3 or 4 new ones just to make up new criteria.
no, but let me circulate what is the general set of criteria that are used for redistricting, and then we can discuss if we even want to prioritize one over the other and or include some not specifically listed. Does that make sense?
Sure.
It's a lot of it is prioritization, how you prioritize one over the other, because you can't do it all.
Right. There's an inherent set of conflicts within the criteria. Anything else we should put on the table today? Yes, Tom.
I had sent out rather late, I think it was earlier this afternoon, an email that's mostly written to Patrick about the process that's got to be followed to actually get us to a contract for council services, which we all know we would like to have yesterday, but we're slowly working our way towards that goal. And my concern is that as I look at it, especially if this ends up being a contract in excess of $100,000, we may not have a council selected and signed up and ready to start till the end of December. And I just want to be sure we're all aware of that. That's not desirable. The desirable thing would be to have it as soon as possible. It is holding up some of the work that we're doing. But the process the county goes through, especially for contracts over 100,000, requires full legislative approval. And I asked Patrick, well, I'll ask Caitlin since she's here. I think Caitlin, you're still with us, right?
Yep, I'm here.
Do we know when the second meeting of the legislature is scheduled for December? Is it the 20th or the 27th?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can find out for you.
I believe
Okay.
it's 20th.
Is it the 20th, Javon?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, because again, with these not coming back till the 29th of November, and then we have to do our review, and then we have to make a recommendation. And if it's going to the legislature, it has to go to a committee first, and then it goes to the full legislature. I don't think there's any way it makes that first meeting in December. It would have to be the second one on the 20th. And even then, once that gets approved, there are some things that have to be done with the Department of Law and purchasing, signing off. And you have to actually get people in a room to sign a contract. And that may well mean the week after Christmas by the time we get a signed contract. And I just want everybody to be aware that even if things go our way, we could be looking at not having a council until the start of the new year.
Right. I appreciated that email, Tom. It was unfortunately elucidating. And Patrick clearly has a major impact on a major feeling for where all of that is likely to shake through. Anything else? I will attempt to take the pieces that I've got on the mapping RFP, make some revisions based on the comments today, and get them into the full RFP format, just so that everybody has those for review. I don't think we're ready to send it out yet, but at least everyone will have that to think about and continue these conversations. Caitlin's going to circulate the information with regard to last decade's litigation, and Patricia's going to circulate the information with regard to criteria. Was there anything else on the to-do list? Yes, Patricia.
So Caitlin's also going to follow up with Pat on getting a contact for updating the web.
And the insurance.
And the insurance, correct.
Yeah, and Larry, on my comments, just to be clear, it was really just more making sure that whatever we listed as scope of services was as closely as possible evaluated so we don't run into a problem. That's all.
Understood. Thank you, Warren.
And Patricia.
Anyone else? Go ahead, John.
Patricia, would you send the mapping that's available now?
The software, the mapping tools?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I think it might even be in that same presentation, but I'll make sure if it's not, to send that to you.
Thank you.
Yep. Let me just make a note. And I had one other action item. So Mark's timeline, we talked about adding in a milestone for the recommendation to the commission from the MMD as being end of March or April. As something that I saw as an action item. So Mark was going to update that. Mark, do I have that right?
I just didn't have a date. Do you want to put the end of April? Because we have to go, or we're shooting for whatever their meeting date is in June. So if we get it by the start of May, that'll give us a month to work on it. Is that close enough?
I think she had said end of March, beginning of April. So
That's gonna be tight for them. You know, if they don't get their mapping going until January, if we're not gonna get a council, we're not gonna get mapping until January.
this
That'd
whole
be
thing is
tight.
tight. This whole thing is
Yeah,
tight.
That's gonna be
Yeah.
tight for them. And if we're working collaboratively the way we should be helping them, they can help us with those where our lines meet. We should be working pretty closely together. So if we said like the end of April, and I'll put that as a, then that gives us May and part of June to get our final report. Would that be long enough, or do you want to go middle of April?
It's the MMD's decision, I think, as to what they think.
And I think they need a full committee to make it.
Right, exactly. So
But again, this is a draft, you know.
Right.
If we say
For this-
we would like to have it by the end of April, and they come back and says, look, we're going to get it to you, March 31st. That's great. If we're going to give it to you May 15th, well, we'll work with that date too. It's just.
And all of us are going to have to work with how we do the public hearings in between here too.
True.
Both the MMD and the full commission.
Mark, I want to raise a question. You have June 20th down here of 2022 as our target date. I'm kind of curious why you picked the 20th instead of the end of June, the 30th.
Well, June 20th, if I look at the map, I thought they met on Thursdays or Mondays.
Mondays.
Yeah,
Mondays
Because
and
June
usually
20th is a Monday, I think. But that's the third Monday in the month. Then I found out they actually meet the first Monday.
second
No,
Monday.
second Monday.
Okay, so
Second
that
Monday.
really should be June 14th. That's what I was shooting for, their June meeting.
Well, that's the beginning of when you could possibly have committee meetings for the following meeting. But I think as a practical matter, if we said the 30th of June, I think that would be a reasonable target. I think we're going to have a tough time being done by then, but to start inching it back to the 20th or the 14th or something, based on when the county legislature meets, I think that's unnecessary. I think we should still try to focus on a specific date. And I think June 30th was the one we talked about from the beginning.
Okay, I'll just change that to June 30th. And then.
But hold on a second. Let me just back up and remember. So we said, when does didn't we have a drop dead date for when we felt the legislature needs to for it to go to the floor for approval?
I thought it
Beginning of
was
September.
June. It's September?
We were shooting for getting it all done by June, but I think the drop dead was to get it done by September.
I thought so, because it was the end of the summer in my view. But I do think that it's going to have to go through the law committee, one would assume, as other stuff, in order to get introduced to the floor. And that can, based on things I've seen, it can get caught up in the law committee. So I do think we should keep the end of June as the piece in terms of working with the law committee, at least, not as it going out to the floor, because it's going to have to go through their committee, and that's a process.
Yeah, I saw the ultimate work product is a draft local law for us to come up with. And I saw the deadline as hopefully June 30th, but we always talked about having a fallback that it could be as late as the end of August.
You said September.
Okay.
Okay, so when do you want the MMD to, and then again, it's a draft. You want me to put the end of April? That gives us May and June.
I personally would rather it was somewhere around the middle of April, because I know we've got a lot to do after we get the report from them to draw all these other districts.
Oh, so what you're saying is we're not going to draw any districts until we get their report? That does,
It's
We've
an
had various
iterative process.
discussions.
Soon.
One of the things that people have talked about is the ability to draw some of the districts around the periphery of the county and work our way towards the area of City of Albany where the MMDs will most likely be. That's not a perfect goal, but you could do a lot of work on the outer parts of the county before you have to wrestle with exactly where the boundaries are with the MMDs in the inner city.
I kind of find it hard when you're drawing maps to only take portions. You got to put all the puzzle pieces together, but I think we leave that to the mappers. I still, in my view, and this is just my opinion at this point, we draw the entire set of maps and they draw their MMD maps, and then we compare. Because if we just start on the edges,
That's too, yeah.
it's too ethereal.
And
The
the lines-
majority of the
the lines keep-
population is inner city. So you create an issue by leaving it to the end.
And the lines keep shifting as you work through the process. It's really an iterative process. You can't really nail down one district until you nail down all districts.
yeah.
True.
So,
Now, in my head, and I may be totally wrong on this, but that's a mapper's job. He's going to put the numbers in. He's going to put the requirements in, the sizes and all that kind of stuff. And he's going to come back or whatever the company's going to come back and say, this meets all your criteria. And then we're just tweaking lines here and there. We're not drawing every district
Well,
ourselves. Then why do we have
That's not-
mappers?
no, I think that, I mean, if you look at what's happening now
Mhm.
in the New York State IRC, there's a process there too, where the feedback from the community is going to have an influence
Yes.
besides.
Yes.
And we have to allow for there to be enough time that we present maps for the feedback and us to adjust. But also the different criteria in which you can draw the lines where they can shift. I don't think that's the mappers so much as us interactively with the mappers, really figuring that out.
our job.
Yeah, but I
That's
think
the
that-
part of it that's not purely numeric.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's interpretation and
And it requires some knowledge of the communities.
a lot of knowledge of the communities. What you want to keep together, the areas that a representative should cover. And if it's like, you go back to that whole situation right now in Cohoes where I live, I am literally on the border of 3 districts. If I lived across the street, I would have a different representative. If I lived across the street the other way, I would have a different representative. There are 3 representatives for where I live.
But that's going to happen wherever the maps join.
No, not necessarily.
Not in
Not
the
if we-
outer lying areas,
Yeah,
only in the cities, inner cities.
until we get into it, it's like,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to discuss.
The numbers drive a great deal of it, but the interpretation and the non-numeric portions of it is really critical. And that's why we're here. That's why this isn't being done by a mapper, just being given it and do it. It's those interpretive pieces of this, which is why we've been selected to do this.
Mark, I think we started this all, and I know we're in overtime now, but we started this all trying to settle on exactly when we'd like to see a report from the MMD. And I've heard dates from the end of March to the end of April. I suppose you could make that one of your little arrows that has the end of March to the end of April. And somewhere in there would be the report from the MMD, ideally. I'd like to see it around the middle of April, but again, if we are not able to settle on a specific date, we could leave it as flexible.
You know, it's a draft. I just didn't want to lock the MMD into, you know, if this is so, and see, in my mind, if the computer spits it out and it fits all the criteria, then if you start to move lines, then you start to play games. But if there's logic, hey, wait a minute, this is one little cul-de-sac. Why are you going to cut a cul-de-sac at? I get it. I understand that. But if you start to move lines because, you know, you just want, then we're starting to play games with the thing. So, but if it's that interpretive, I didn't want to lock the MMD into a shortened timeline just because of we got to get on with our work. But again, it's a tentative date. So if you want April 15th, we'll go tax day. That's fine with me. And knowing that it'll slip, or I could do what you want, Tom, is I could make the line go and then it could turn like a different shade, knowing that it's getting close to the end time. We need it within this timeline, you know. But again, it's a draft. And then I was going to mention to Maria, if you wanted me to give you this, or I could work with you to build your own timeline, or if you're good with, I did this in PowerPoint. If you're good, then I could just send you the draft, and then you can manipulate the numbers. It's up to, you know, whatever you need.
Yeah, if you could just send us a draft.
I'll send you our draft. And we really we still haven't decided on that first public hearing. You know, I put in April, but some people said earlier. So, you know, that may be a discussion for next week.
Right.
I really would like to see some discussion on that, because I think there would be a value to us going out early, like January or February, in a county-wide public hearing, asking people for their feedback in general before there are any maps. I personally think that would be helpful, but I don't know how the rest of the commission feels.
I agree.
As do I, but let's start off our discussion next week with that.
Okay.
Sounds
All
good.
right. Have a good week, everybody.
You want a
Good to
motion
see you
to
all.
adjourn, Larry?
So moved.
Yes, and Caitlin, would you stop the recording, please?
Yes, I will.
Okay. And there was a
Bye,
motion